40 million credit and debit cards. That is what walked out of one retailer over a single holiday shopping season, and it is the most expensive incident response failure on this exam. The detection worked perfectly. The intrusion detection system lit up like a Christmas tree, and the breach still happened anyway, because somewhere in this story, a real human being saw a real alert and decided it could wait. And there is a finish line in this incident that almost everybody misses, the exact line that fails good Security Plus candidates. Stay with me, because by the end you will never make that mistake.
Detecting the attack is the starting gun, not the finish line. Hey everyone, Chris here, and that is the single most expensive misconception in this whole domain. You find the intruder, you feel that rush of relief, and your brain wants to call it done. It is not done, it is barely begun.
There is one mistake hiding in that gap that fails good candidates who actually understand the technology, the kind of people who can configure a firewall in their sleep. By the end, you will know exactly what it is and the single rule that prevents it. Let me set the scene with the breach that teaches this better than any textbook.
This is Cynthia, and I want to put real people behind that number first. In late 2013, a major retailer's network got infected with malware that sat on the checkout registers and skimmed card data as customers swiped. The monitoring software, a tool called FireEye, caught it. It sent alerts. The alerts went to a security team who saw them and did not act. The malware kept running for almost 2 weeks while it quietly shipped card numbers out of the building. The company did not announce the breach to the public until December 19th, and by then, roughly 40 million cards were already gone.
I'm Alina, and this is the failure mode I stress test for in every plan. The technology worked, the detection worked, the human process that was supposed to take that detection and turn it into containment. That is what broke. A perfect sensor wired to a team that ignores it is the same as no sensor at all. And the lesson there is not, buy a better sensor, because they had a great sensor. The lesson is that incident response is a process people execute under pressure, and a process only works if someone rehearsed it, owned it, and had the authority to act. The tool was never the weak link. The plan around it was. So the exam does not just ask you to name the phases. It asks you to put them in order, and it loves to hand you a scenario where the team already detected the threat and then ask, what do you do next? If your answer stops at detection, you fail the question and you would fail the real incident.
Watch the trick wording on those questions, because CompTIA loves the words best, first, and most likely. The answer that is technically possible is rarely the answer they want. They want the first correct action in the lifecycle, the one the process says you do next. And knowing the phases in order is literally how you decode those questions.
One comfort before we go deeper. This domain, security operations, is the biggest slice of the whole exam, 28%. So the time you spend getting incident response right pays off more than almost anything else you study. This is high leverage material.
And there is a clean way to hold all 7 phases in your head so the order never slips. Before we get to it, Chris had a question come up that frames exactly how people get this wrong.
Yes, this one comes up under every incident response video, almost word for word. Folks ask, if my security tools already alerted me to the attack, isn't the hard part over? And that instinct is exactly what we have to unlearn today.
Hold that question, because the answer is the whole episode. Coming up, the 7 phases in the exact order the exam grades, the 2 breaches that prove why order matters, a real terminal where we contain an attack live, and the one rule that catches every trick question. Let me lock that order in first. Let me give you the whole life cycle as CompTIA frames it for Objective 4.8, because the order is the part the exam grades. There are 7 phases, and I want you to picture them as a wheel that turns, not a straight line that ends. Why a wheel matters is the deepest idea in this domain, and it is worth slowing down for. A straight line has an end, and that mental model is exactly what makes people stop too early. A wheel never lets you stop because the last phase feeds the first. Here is the order locked in. Here is the cycle, in the exact order the exam wants. Preparation, detection, analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned, which loops you straight back to preparation.
Preparation is the phase everyone underrates, so let me make it concrete. Preparation is everything you build before anything goes wrong. The playbooks, the contact list, the logging that is actually turned on, the backups you have tested, the team that knows who calls the lawyer and who calls law enforcement. Think of it like a fire drill at my kids' school. You do not invent the evacuation route while the building is on fire. You practiced it in September so that in March nobody has to think. Preparation is the September that makes the March survivable.
And preparation includes the boring infrastructure that wins incidents. Logging that is actually turned on and retained long enough to investigate a communication plan with real phone numbers, tested backups, because an untested backup is just a hope. The exam rewards treating these as part of incident response, not separate from it. Detection and analysis come next, and the exam pairs them on purpose. Detection is the alert firing, the sensor noticing something is off. Analysis is the human work right after, confirming it is a real incident and not a false alarm. Then figuring out how big it is, how many machines, which accounts, what data. Analysis is also where you collect your indicators of compromise, the fingerprints. A weird outbound IP address, a strange file hash, a suspicious domain. Those indicators are what you will later feed into containment and threat hunting. So good analysis is what makes every phase after it sharper.
Here is where the order earns its keep. The very next phase is containment, not eradication. You stop the bleeding before you try to clean the wound. When this breaks in the real world, it breaks because someone tries to delete the malware before they have isolated the host, and the attacker just watches them do it and digs in deeper. After containment comes eradication, then recovery. Eradication is removing the threat completely. The malware, the backdoor, the attacker's foothold. Recovery is bringing systems back to normal, carefully, while you watch to make sure the threat is truly gone and does not come right back.
And recovery is more cautious than it sounds, which the exam likes to test. You do not flip everything back on at once. You restore in stages, you validate each system is clean before it rejoins the network, and you keep monitoring extra hard because attackers love to come back through a door you forgot to close.
And the seventh phase, lessons learned, is the one that turns a wheel into a wheel. You hold a meeting, usually within 2 weeks while it is fresh, and you ask what worked, what failed, and what we change. Those changes flow straight back into preparation, and the cycle is stronger next time. Cynthia, there is a question that trips people up on exactly where one phase ends and the next begins. Go ahead and put it to the room.
Sure, the one I hear most is this. On the exam, what is the difference between containment and eradication, and which one comes first?
Containment comes first, every time. Containment is stopping the spread, isolating the infected machine so the attacker cannot reach anything else. Eradication is the cleanup that comes after, actually removing the malware and the foothold. Contain, then eradicate, and if a question puts eradication before containment, that option is wrong.
Before we keep going, one small favor that actually moves the needle. If this is landing for you, tap like, then subscribe and turn on the bell so you do not miss the rest. 2 taps, completely free, and it pushes this in front of more people who need it.
Let me stress test the life cycle against the worst case, because that is where you actually learn it. Stick with me, because the next 2 cases explain more exam questions than any definition will. The single most common failure in real incidents is not a missing tool. It is a team that detects the threat and then freezes, because nobody decided in advance who has the authority to pull a server off the network. Containment is the phase that answers that. And the reason it comes before eradication is pure damage control. Every minute an infected host stays connected, the attacker can spread sideways, steal more, or destroy evidence. Containment freezes the situation so the cleanup can happen on your terms, not theirs. Containment has 3 flavors the exam likes. Isolation, where you cut the host off entirely. Segmentation, where you wall off a whole zone of the network. And sandboxing, where you let the malware run in a safe, watched cage to study it without it touching anything real.
And the order discipline is not academic. Let me give you the case that proves it costs real money. In 2017, a credit bureau got breached and roughly 147 million people had their data exposed. The root cause is a 4.8 lesson in 2 parts. Part 1 was detection that quietly went blind. The company had a device watching encrypted traffic for exactly this kind of theft, but the certificate that let it inspect that traffic had expired, so the monitoring was effectively switched off, and the attackers moved data for months before anyone noticed on the 29th of July.
Part 2 was eradication that never finished. The way in was a known flaw in a web framework called Apache Struts, and a patch existed. The fix was available the same day the flaw was announced in March. But it was not applied everywhere, so the door the attackers used stayed propped open while everyone assumed it was closed. So put the 2 stories together. One retailer detected and did not contain, one bureau half detected and never fully eradicated, different phases but the same shape. The life cycle is only as strong as its weakest phase, and skipping or half doing one is how a small intrusion becomes a headline.
The antidote to freezing in the moment is a playbook. A playbook is a written step-by-step procedure for one specific incident type. Ransomware has its own, phishing has its own. The ransomware one runs like this, and seeing the steps in order is the whole point. Notice it names who does what in what order with the hard decisions pre-made so that at 3 in the morning nobody is improvising. Isolate before you eradicate is baked right into step 2 and step 5. It is preparation made portable.
And a good playbook assumes things will go wrong. It tells you what to do when the primary responder is unreachable, when the backups are also encrypted, when the obvious fix does not work. The happy path is easy to write. The value is in the branches for when it breaks.
One more containment nuance the exam loves. There is a tension between containing fast and preserving evidence. Sometimes the textbook clean move, taking a forensic image before you touch anything, costs you time you do not have while data is actively walking out. The exam wants you to know both goals exist and that when life is on the line, stopping the harm usually wins.
Eradication is more thorough than people expect. It is not just deleting the one file the alert flagged. It is finding every host the attacker touched, every account they created, every backdoor and scheduled task they left behind. Miss one and recovery just hands the network back to them, which is why eradication comes before recovery, never the other way around.
All right, this is the part a slide can never give you. We are going to do containment for real in a terminal on a lab machine we own and control. Everything you see here runs in an isolated test environment for defensive understanding, never against a system you do not have written authority to touch. Here is the scenario. Our intrusion detection just screamed about a suspicious connection from one Linux server, so detection is done. Now the wrong instinct is to yank the network cable and feel safe. But watch what that instinct destroys.
Because there is an order to evidence, and it is not a suggestion. It comes from a forensic standard, RFC 3227, called the Order of Volatility. The rule is simple and brutal. Collect the evidence that disappears fastest, first. Let me put it on the board. Live network connections and running processes live in memory. Pull the plug and they are gone forever. And with them, the proof of where the attacker was talking to. So before we isolate anything, we snapshot the volatile stuff. First, the active connections.
Stop right there. See that line? A live connection out to a stranger on port 4444, owned by a process called NC, Netcat. That is a reverse shell phoning home to the attacker. If we had pulled the cable, that proof would have evaporated, and we would never know who they were talking to. Next, we capture the running processes, because the process list dies with the power too. We want the malicious program's process ID and the exact command that launched it while it is still alive to ask.
And look at the end of that line, -e/bin/bash. That is not just a connection, it is a full interactive shell, the attacker typing commands on our server in real time. Capturing the exact command they ran is gold for the investigation, and it vanishes the second that process dies.
There is our process, PID 8841. Now, and only now, do we contain. We still keep the machine powered on, but we cut its ability to talk to anyone except the responder. This is isolation at the host firewall, with iptables.
Read those 3 lines, because the order inside them matters too. First, we explicitly allow our responder workstation in and out. Then, and only then, we set the default policy to drop everything else. If you flip that order and set drop first, you would lock yourself out before adding the allow rule. Small detail, big difference at 3 in the morning. The attacker's command channel just went dead, but the box is still running for forensics. In a modern shop, you do this with one click in your endpoint detection and response console, an EDR isolate action, which quarantines the host while still letting your team reach it. The iptables version shows you what that button does underneath.
I love that you can still get to the box. A lot of people think containment means yank it off the planet. It does not. It means cut the attacker's path while keeping a controlled path for your responders so you can keep investigating a live machine instead of a dead one.
And finally, with the evidence captured and the host isolated, we kill the malicious process. Notice this is the last step, not the first. Evidence, then containment, then we shut the thing down.
And that is the whole discipline in 4 commands. Capture connections, capture processes, isolate, then kill. Reverse that order and you are flying blind. This is exactly the muscle memory that the 2 breaches we talked about were missing. Now stress test it. What if the malware was clever and only lived in memory, never writing a file to disk? That is a fileless attack, and it is common. If you power off first, that entire attack vanishes and you will never know it happened. So capturing the volatile stuff first is the only way you ever catch the in-memory only intruder.
That sequence is also a gift on the exam. When a question gives you a live talking compromised host and 4 answer choices, the right one captures volatile evidence before it isolates and isolates before it powers off. Memory before disk every time. That single rule will win you points across this entire domain. So if containment is where you survive the incident, preparation and lessons learned are where you make sure the next one is smaller. And these phases hide 2 exam favorites that people constantly mix up. Let me untangle them because the wording on the test is precise. Preparation includes practicing your response before you need it, and there are 2 ways to practice that the exam treats as distinct. One is cheap and talky. One is expensive and real. Get the difference clear and you will catch the trick wording instantly.
A tabletop exercise is a discussion. The team sits in a room, someone reads out a scenario, and everyone walks through what they would do step by step out loud. Nothing real is touched. It is low cost, low risk, and it is brilliant for finding the gaps in your plan and the gaps in who knows what.
But talking through it is not doing it under fire. A simulation is the opposite end. It is a live drill, run against real or realistic systems, where the response actually happens. You might detonate safe malware in a test network and make the team contain it for real. Higher cost, higher fidelity, and it surfaces the failures a conversation never will. Here is the honest trade-off, because the exam respects it. Tabletops are so cheap you can run them quarterly, but a room full of confident answers can hide a process that collapses under real pressure. Simulations expose that, but they cost real time and can disrupt production if you are careless.
So here's what I would actually do, and I will commit to it. Run tabletops on a schedule, because the team you have is the one that finishes the reps, not the perfect one that only drills once a year. But back them with at least one real simulation a year, because the gap between knowing and doing only shows up when something actually breaks. That is the smart play.
And Lessons Learned has its own exam term, root cause analysis. This is the discipline of asking why until you hit the real reason. The malware ran, why an employee clicked, why the email got through, why the filter had a gap. The symptom was the click, but the root cause was the gap, so you fix the gap. And do not skip the human side of lessons learned because the exam tests it. Recovery is not just turning systems back on, it includes deciding when to bring them back, validating they are clean, and watching closely for the threat returning. And throughout, there is communication: who tells the customers, who tells regulators, who tells law enforcement, and within what legal deadline.
That communication piece is where I have watched good responses fall apart. If your plan does not say in writing who is allowed to speak for the company during an incident, you will get a panicked employee posting on social media or a manager promising regulators something untrue. Decide it in preparation, so it is not a question at the worst possible moment.
There is one more idea in this domain that flips the whole mindset, and I want to bring in someone who lives in it. We have a guest on the line who knows the incident response lifecycle cold. Let me get them in.
Happy to be here. The idea Jasmine means is threat hunting, and it is the proactive cousin of everything we have discussed. Detection waits for an alert to fire, but threat hunting refuses to wait. You assume an attacker is already inside, quietly below the threshold of any alert, and you go looking for them on purpose. A hunter starts with a hypothesis, something like, if an attacker were living off the land here, I would expect to see unusual remote connections at odd hours. Then they hunt through the logs and the live hosts for exactly that pattern, with the same volatile evidence commands Chris just showed you. Found early, an intrusion is a footnote. Found by accident, it is a breach.
That is the perfect place to close the wheel. Preparation, detection, analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, lessons learned, and then threat hunting feeding right back in. Thank you for jumping on.
So here is the bottom line, the one thing to carry home from this whole domain. Before your exam, say the 7 phases out loud in order 3 times and add the one rule that catches the trick questions. Contain before you eradicate, capture evidence before you isolate, and never let detection be your finish line.
So here is the one thing to carry out of Objective 4.8. Detection is the starting gun, not the finish line. The 7 phases run in a fixed order, and the exam catches anyone who stops early or swaps containment and eradication.
Lock it in tonight with 1 rep. Say the 7 phases out loud in order, then add the 2 rules that catch the trick questions. Contain before you eradicate and capture volatile evidence before you isolate.
Next time we pull apart digital forensics proper, and wait until you see the one mishandled drive that sank an entire case in court. That volatile evidence we grabbed today is worthless if you cannot prove nobody tampered with it.
If this made the life cycle finally click, hit like and subscribe so the next Security Plus video lands in your feed, and you can study the whole series free over at certs.professorerica.com. We are building this so you can pass on the first try, and one to chew on. In both breaches, the tools worked and the people froze, so here is my question. Does your team or your home setup actually have someone with the authority to pull a machine offline at 3 in the morning? Tell us in the comments.
I will let the recap speak for itself on this one.
This is Jasmine. Thanks for watching and signing off.